Hello, Mark.
Long time no see.
A few minutes ago. How are you?
Good man. Like I told you, just so you know, I don't want to be rude, but at 1:25, I got a definitely hard jump out of here. So
For sure. No worries at all. Hello, Alex. Nice to see you. Hello,
Hello, thank
Simon.
you.
Welcome, guys. Let's wait for 1 minute before we get deeper into the main subject. I think it's a nice opportunity to introduce ourselves. Um, for me, I'm doing the beginning. I have a business background, and the one last year, I'm working mostly on creating knowledge bases and digital twins. I'm mostly investigating on them and build a couple of examples. The previous years, my main profession was building operational systems for companies using low-code platforms, focusing on delivering solutions upfront as soon as possible. And Mark, we're gonna go next.
yeah, sure, sure. My name is Mark Peterson. I live in New York City. Um, in like 1984, I was writing computer arcade games in assembly language when I was a teenager, and taking college courses in computer science while I was in high school. And then I discovered girls and wanted to make movies and kind of left software entirely, went off to have a 20 to 30-year career in the technology side of the film industry. And then I left that industry to go back into software. And for the past 3 years, I have been I did a startup previously, a specialty in AI before AI was a thing and before ChatGPT existed. I built co-founded a company called Color Lab AI, which is a very specialized AI software for assisting movie colorists in coloring films. Was a very successful launch. It's making millions of dollars a year. I still own like 23% of the company, but myself and the co-founder were like this over the fact that I wanted to do other things with AI for the industry, and he only wanted to do color because he's a colorist. So he might have been right, but anyway, I left that startup and I decided to do one big last swing for the fences on an idea that I had talked about with my co-founders for another 20 years. So that's Orbiter IO. It's an AI relationship intelligence platform that is focused on, it's made for people who have huge networks of high value relationships. And the idea is that it helps you leverage your entire network to achieve specific outcomes or to help another person, right? So anyway, it's we're coming out of stealth in March, and we're going to show everybody what it is, and we're going to launch a seed round. But I've spent the past, I would say, 2 years out of the three. I've spent the past 2 years um, just becoming a graph database lunatic, and I'm sure there's other people here that may have a lot more experience than I do, but it has been my everyday for the past 2+ years is testing just going down the deep rabbit hole. So I'm super opinionated about it, but I'm only from my own personal experiences and what works for me, so that's me anyway. And I never tell a short story, and I can talk for 400 hours about anything. So I'm a context fire hose, if you will.
Thanks, Mark. Simon, would you mind to tell us some more about you and what's your experience on knowledge bases and knowledge graphs?
Sure, yeah. Um, well,
Up.
and
Uh,
was in philosophy. I did philosophy, and so when I heard about things like cognitive science, I studied that for a while, and I worked on a semantic search engine project before before somebody came up with a search engine called Google. I don't know what happened to them, but we certainly went out of business. And then Google actually said, no, semantics, nobody does that, and nobody's interested in that. And then they came up with the knowledge graphs and things. So when I looked at knowledge graphs, I thought, well, these are a bit like the kind of ontologies and classification schemes that we were working on to produce data for a semantic search engine. And a lot of the stuff that was being done in NLP and in machine learning, it was aiming at the same results that we were aiming at in the 1990s with classifying data and trying to create semantic data and metadata and that. So when I got hold of a knowledge graph or the concept of a knowledge graph, I started to put together what I hoped would be a knowledge graph that could be used by people in the fields of building safety, because I was working in a building safety project at the time, and I think knowledge graphs can do that very well. But that's where I am at the moment.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thanks. Um, I would suggest to get into the conversation because people join us here, and let's start with the main point. And everybody who shares his personal knowledge and ideas, feel free, guys, to tell to get 1 minute to share about you and your background. So the main subject of this conversation today is about how can we build knowledge bases and knowledge graphs that can bring us back reasonable results. That's the point. So we can have them as a really useful tool in our side. Mark is somehow a mentor to my journey, sharing his thoughts and his learnings so far as a member of another community, State Change. We're both members in that. And I was working in a personal project that actually gets the transcripts from the user and it converts them into a knowledge graph. And then the user can start getting to the conversation with his entire brain. So let's say we feed multiple transcripts to create a digital version of a brain. That's the knowledge base, okay? And then the user can start chatting with his brain, trying to figure it out what's going on, which are the similarities, try to answer any kind of question. The interesting thing from this path and part of my learning is not what is the response the AI returns back to the user, but what is the reason for giving back this response. So I'm coming with the question, and I would love to listen to you all guys. What is, from your perspective, that makes reasonable the results on a knowledge base? Mark, would you mind to start with you? Because I know you want to drop in a few minutes.
Yeah.
I know you're going to drop, and I would
Well,
love to have your
sure.
opinion.
Sure. So my opinion is that, that question is infinitely vague. And my, again, I kind of get from what I had said in the other community, like I like to approach everything from first principles, and I really like to just try to distill down the why are we doing this? What are we trying to get out of this, right? And there is a lot of different ways you can work with a knowledge graph. There is a number of different nuances to knowledge graph technology that some are available on some graph platforms, some are not, right? But from a 30,000-foot view, the themes and how it works is quite universal, right? But the devil's in the details, and I think that you need to. I like to say that like your ontology is the ceiling of your graph's intelligence. It's not exactly true because I'll add a little nuance to that, but like So you have to start with like what your ontology is the magic thing, right? And you asked me before, and I couldn't articulate it at the time. You're like, well, how do you approach making an ontology, right? And because and look, I'll also say there is no right or wrong answer to any of this. It's like, what do you want to achieve with this graph, right? You really got to understand that, right? And then you make a strategy and you make an ontology for that. And then there are, depending on your level of research or how many things you've tried, there are like I've hit some inflection points of huge unlocks. Like I mentioned to you before in the other session today, this whole hyper edges was a massive unlock for me and really changed uh, how Orbiter is working right now. But again, you need to come from an approach of like what I need to do with my graphs totally different than the example you gave of what you need to do with your other graph. So you have to start with what is the result
Mhm.
that you're trying to get, right? And then once you understand that, once you understand and you have a general, so I kind of approach ontology in stages. Once I kind of understand the first principle understanding of what I want to get out of the graph, then I do like a first basic, like, okay, here would be the basic way to do this, right? But
Mhm.
then you just have to start going in deeper. And then the other thing is sort of like it's about the queries you'll never think to ask. I put this on LinkedIn the other day. I was like, it's not just the ones you know today. You need to design an ontology for the queries that you can't think of that may be asked by the user for this specific use case. And that helps drive it. Now, and again, it depends on how you're using the graph. The way that we use a graph, of course, is we're trying to get context to then apply an AI to that context for an answer, right? So we want to we're reaching out to the graph to pull back information. So how you query, now there's a number of levels in terms of how you query, right? Are you querying semantically? Are you querying straight cipher? Are you doing a hybrid combination and on and on? And there, and like I said, like there's 100 things you can do. And I'm not going to sit on my high horse and tell you this is what you should do. I will sit on my high horse and say, this is what I found to work the best for what I'm building,
Mm.
right? And for what outcomes I need to achieve, if that makes sense. But like, look, it all starts with the ontology because it's all about context, right? But how you structure that, the hypernode thing, the hyperedge thing, I just want to kind of highlight that because it was a big unlock for me, and that is effectively just means I could share my screen really quick. It effectively show you this little silly doodle. What it really means is that you're putting a node, you're using a node, right, as context. So in this example, right, it's Mark introduces Sarah to Alex, right?
Mhm.
So here's Alex, here's Mark and Sarah, but there's a context node, right? Which is another way to do a hyperedge because Falker, I'm on Falker as a graph database technology, and they don't support hyperedge in the way that some other database technologies do. So you do it, which is what is effectively referred to as um, uh, you're simulating a hyperedge, right? By creating a context node. But the interesting thing here is I do vector embeddings inside every node. And so, and that's a vector index. But I also make my edges are very context rich with very LLM friendly descriptions, but I do not have vector embeddings in my edges. Okay. So by implementing these context nodes, if you will, what this does for me is now this context is straight up in my vector index, right? So it's even more powerful. Now, most of the time I would capture those edges and the context of those edges anyway from casting my semantic search against those nodes, right? But anyway, I feel like I'll talk for hours on this. You should ask me like a more specific question. But look, it's you know, I, I'm starting a Substack because we're doing this seed raise in March, and so I need to start ramping up and posting on social, even though I loathe LinkedIn and I don't have the time for it. So I'm going to make a kick off a Substack, and I was thinking of this writing this first post essay about sort of, and calling it cooking with context, right? Because that's what this is all about, right? It's all about the context
Mm-hmm.
and which context you're getting when, right? I mean, searching and querying is how you transverse the graph, right? And look, a straight up semantic search for some use cases in our application is actually not the answer for certain searches. So again, it really depends on what you want to do. And I do want to also point out, because I don't have a lot of time, another big unlock for me, and I think you need to go down this rabbit hole a little bit yourself, is with the example you gave me,
Mm.
is, and I don't know, buzz terminology is buzz terminology, but I refer to this as intelligence layer. Okay, so we have in Orbiter two separate intelligence layers. And the intelligence layer is outside of the graph. Okay, it's in SQL, ProgSQL, it's in Xano, it's in tables, but it is derived from the graph and it is anonymous. You're removing the actual pure identifiers of the people. So what you're doing is you're running a cron task, whatever, at midnight every night. We make a series of queries to the graph to create, which is essentially just statistics. It's
Mm-hmm.
statistics,
Yeah.
okay? But it's what are those statistics? That's your secret sauce, right? So your design and like when I say the word ontology now, for me, and this is probably incorrect, I just think of the whole damn architectural design of every piece of data and where it is. That's how I think about it, right? In and out of the graph of what I'm using. And maybe that's not right, but when I think of ontology, I'm like, what is all of my data? How is it labeled and where is it? That's what I think about, right? As an ontology. And by you made a point too, and you say, oh, the brain, it's the intelligence. Well, you're not really accurate there. It's really you just, but it's really just a document. Okay. Now if you were to add an intelligence, like this is kind of a dumb example, but like if you were to baby step into an intelligence layer on the application you described, what you would be doing is you would be querying that graph to come up with some metrics, some statistics is the easiest way I can describe it, right? Some repeatable patterns and some general overall statistics and putting those in a table, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now, like what we do in Orbiter is that when you type a semantic request and you say, who do I know that can fly a plane? Okay. And I go against the graph embeddings with that question against, right? I also fire off in parallel a separate request to the intelligence layer, right? And I have a general intelligence layer, which is the general graph. And then I have a user intelligence layer, which is built from the user's graph. Because we're multi-tenancy, we do a user graph for every user, and we have a master graph, which is a different animal. So we query down to get these statistics of the user, this intelligence layer, and then we merge that back as more context when we run the LLM against it. And the results are like night and day. Now, that's going to depend on your design. What are those statistics? And like I said, it's like, what is the result you're trying to give back to the user? So like I can only really speak to like the problems I'm trying to solve with the exact thing I'm trying to do. And they're not necessarily going to apply to everyone else's use of a graph. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And
Mark, could I ask you a question here?
Yeah, David.
Um, when you're talking about context and your users, who is the actual observer? Is that the person who is using your service, or is that is that somebody who buys into your service, or are they subscribers? I'm
Yeah, it's a
sorry.
user. It's a user. It's a subscription model. Yeah, it's a user.
Okay. All that's good. I'm just coming at, as I mentioned in the last hour, that I'm looking at this from a phone app perspective. And so my user is looking at data or documents or transcripts that are on their phone, as opposed to a larger data model that might live in the cloud. And, my model is a word cloud. And I look at different different tags as lenses looking through that word cloud, and that creates the context in which the user can interpret the data that he has on his phone or in the transcript or whatever to identify the document and the things that are of interest to them, looking at his overall database, if you will, or transcripts through these different lenses of his word cloud. And, I found that at least in one of my apps spaces, called actually Faces and Places, it's a very, very effective way to rapidly drill down. Once you have a way in, uh, the app actually generates a whole bunch of different context or tags that are related to that and anything related to that thing that's related. So suddenly I have a way in, and by looking at the frequency of different tags that are used in that, I can easily drill down into smaller and smaller, from maybe 1,000 to 5 to 2 in a matter of 3 clicks. And, that to me is really, really powerful to be able to search that much. When you look at, when you have all these images on your phone and you're looking for the picture of your wife and your stepdaughter and a Christmas in 2023, and you don't know where to begin looking for that. Now that's the model that I'm working with, to drill down to find that in 2 or 3 clicks, if
Yeah, I
that
mean,
makes any sense.
yeah, I mean, again, I don't, not to go down a rabbit hole or into your thing, but like for me, what you just described is not even relative to a knowledge graph. Like for me, what you described is some pure semantic search. And I would just, if you're just trying to find, it can be a knowledge graph, of course, but I would have to know more about what you're, and this is, I think this is my point, is that like one solution, it really just depends on what data you're starting with and what you want to do with it and what you're trying to get out of it. And if
Context.
just searching, but if it's just searching for existing context, um, yeah, I mean, again, I don't know enough about exactly the back end of what you're doing and what we're talking about with that, but like, I'm not sure what you're describing is 100% fit for even a knowledge graph. It might be. I don't know. I don't know enough.
Well, I'm looking at your nodes, for instance, in the sharing your screen, and I see that those a lot of similarity to what I'm doing. But I can honestly say that I don't understand nodes per se, as in the lexicon that you're using to describe how you statistically search those nodes to find what it is that you're looking for. I just have a different way of looking at that. And I'm not saying one is better than the other. I'm just saying they're different. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
I mean, look, I will say that like, when you search a knowledge graph, when you query a knowledge graph, there's a whole bunch of ways you can query it, right? So people have landed on this, there is this, language, scripting language called Cypher, which is really simple and easy to learn. And it was, I think, created by Neo4j, but it's an open source language that almost every graph database uses. Now, people like Falker, they've got a thing now called Flex, and Flex is a TypeScript extension of Cypher. And so they are putting specific algorithms, down to just a little tiny snippet. So like now in my Cypher to the knowledge graph, I can put a tiny little piece of syntax that's running a whole, TypeScript um, uh, algorithm that normally would be a science project to put in a Cypher. So like there's like what I'm saying is like there's just many, and then of course if you're semantically searching via a Cypher, you know what I mean? You're taking a text, who do I know that can fly a plane? You run embeddings on that. Now you get an array of embeddings, okay? It's just an array of these big ass long vectors. And now you are putting that in the Cypher. And in the Cypher, you're saying, find me where these vectors, the nodes where these vectors land. And the thing that I was showing Dimitris is that you can tell the Cypher that you want to get back the semantic score, which is this how close, right? And by doing this, now you have context to your context. So now I have this bucket of these nodes and edges, right? And I have whatever properties I put on those nodes and edges, right? And again, a lot of this is like cooking with context. The more yummy stuff I have on those edges and those things I have, but by keeping the scores, the semantic scores in that return, I have even more levers. Because now when I'm taking an LLM and I'm putting it against that context to get my new answer, in the system prompt of that LLM, I can say, blah, 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 give me the answer, but prioritize only context with score over this for the first thing, and then only use scores over this for the second thing,
So,
right?
Mark, what are we looking at in the way of time, for instance? I mean, I don't know if you have any time constraints for actually coming up with the data, but the relevance of any search is it meaningful if it comes back to you in seconds or in days or in minutes? That's one of the things that I'm curious about.
Are you talking about response?
Yeah.
It totally depends. It depends on how you're doing what you're doing. Like, that's how long is a piece of string. It's what how much context are you bringing back? Which model are you using? Like, there's 100 different things that affect speed. The speed of Falker uses matrices. So like Falker as a graph technology is almost 500 times faster than Neo4j, literally 500 times faster. So there's 100 things, like even just using infra and using LLMs, like there's a big difference between calling Kimi K2 on Grok can be 20 times faster than calling Open Router with Sonnet. You know what I'm saying? So like you have a lot of levers for speed, right? That's another kind of conversation, So like, we have queries that take a few seconds and we have queries that take milliseconds, right? So it's really just depends on what you're doing, you know?
Gentlemen, can we bring for a moment other people into the conversation to learn from their own experience? For example, I'm really curious for the same question for your opinion, Simon. What do you think that, from your experience again, that makes really what is it that makes a knowledge graph to give us reasonable results when we're using it? What's your findings? What's your thoughts on the topic? Simon? Okay. Most probably Simon cannot. He's muted. Oh, you're back.
Sorry, I had to do something and I missed.
Yeah.
Was there a question? Sorry about that.
Yeah. My question is again, from your perspective and your experience, what is the thing that can make reasonable, John Mark? So let me repeat. What is the thing that can make a knowledge base or knowledge graph to give us back reasonable results from your experience? What's your findings so far?
Well, compared to Mark, I think my experience is much more limited, and but I come from the kind of ontology background, the lexical background, and so my interest is more in using the semantic or lexical content to to perform whatever task it is, whether it's semantic search or document classification or something like that. So it would be the ontology that leads. As for the technology or framework, I don't really have a strong opinion about that.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, when it comes to the choice of knowledge graph, for example, I would use a low or no code one because I'm not a coder, and when it comes to knowledge graphs, building knowledge graphs themselves, it's the same thing really. So maybe I'm kind of coming at it from a different place as well.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Absolute sense. May we bring Alex Katarosa into the conversation? Alex, you wrote a message into the chat introducing yourself.
Yeah.
This is very
Hi.
interesting.
Nice to meet you all.
Would you mind to tell us your experience and share your learnings into the topic? Or
Oh,
please.
well, I'm here to learn. So where
Everybody's
you
here to
gotta,
learn, by the way.
yeah. I don't have a lot to offer. I'm more of like a consumer of this technology than a developer of it. You know, like if you're wondering where your documentation comes from often, it's from a technical writer like myself. So that's why I specialize getting things out of people's heads and on paper. So you can do the kind of semantic work. But I have to level up myself. I think I'm going to quickly become a dinosaur as a traditional technical writer unless I level up and offer, my company or consultant, whoever I'm working for, these ontologies. Like I need to become an ontologist now. Like, I'm realizing that not just today, but I've known that for 6 months maybe. So now I'm tuning in, and that's how I think I somehow found out about this, just to more be a fly on the wall. But my use case, and I'll keep this short, I'm probably in the largest project I've ever been in. And it's for the biggest building ever in the world that's being built. It's called the Mukaab in Saudi Arabia, in Riyadh, at the center of New Murabba, a brand new city. The Mukaab is a 400 by 400 meter square with an immersive holographic dome inside. Like incredible. If you think of theme parks, this is at a scale that's never been seen. Like the Sphere in Las Vegas is like puny compared to what they're building. So all of the work, all of the creativity, everything that's being delivered for the client is just in documents right now.
Okay.
And pictures and great stuff, 3D models, all kinds of great stuff. But I'm just trying to try to figure out how to make it more useful for the client in a future oriented way, like Mark said. Like what kinds of queries people are going to ask in 10 years, who knows? But the work we're doing now is supposed to inform that. So that's kind of my use case right now.
So you're in construction then, Alex. I mean, you're working with a construction use case.
Yeah, not really. Creative consultation. So our company's not going to build it, but we are deciding what it's going to look like, the theming, the stories, the tech, but somebody else will physically build it at some point. So we're more like in your metaphor, we're like architects, not the contractor.
Okay, yeah, that's good.
That makes sense. Alex, if I may ask, All those documents, which are the final output, are AI generated based on the data you have in your knowledge base. How does it work, this process?
We're actually writing these. I am using
Oh.
some AI. I would be a fool not to. I'm expected to use AI to help. The only approved one right now is Copilot inside of our SharePoint, you know. So yeah, but eventually this would be an LLM, a huge LLM. It would be capable of being trained, you know, to train an LLM. But that's it. Like there would be no ontology there. Like they don't even have it in like structured authoring, like Dita or Markdown, or like they don't have modules of knowledge right now. And I feel like that's an obvious thing for me to suggest to them, is kind of getting back to first principles of technical writing and structured authoring. But what you guys are talking about is like a level beyond that, so that this project, which is going to take like 10 years to come to fruition, can this knowledge that we have now can be useful to those people down the line.
Do you think that these people already know what is the problem they want to solve, or they're doing investigation around multiple topics and around this technology, which is not that new, I would say, trying to find their way?
Yeah, so we're the company I work for. We are experts in how to do this. Maybe not at the scale. This is being done at a scale that's never been. But you're right. This is type of thing has been done before. There is a method, and all of the knowledge that we have to deliver is being cut up into like little scopes, if you will. And there's a lot of overlap. It's sort of like a knowledge management problem at the moment. So, but how people are going to use it in the future, that's what I'm trying to think about. You know, it's like, think about it like an art, like if somebody's architected a skyscraper, because this is the size of a skyscraper, and then somebody, when they're building it, they're like, well, how much wiggle room do we have in this? What if we go this way instead of that way? Are we violating the spirit, the intention, the story, the constraints that were approved by the king originally 5-10 years ago?
Nice. Great. So you have a lot of investigation in the future, I guess, and a lot of trial and error, I see.
Hope so. I hope so. That's what I'm used to, you know. So I'm ready to. I'm sort of mid-career right now. I'm 47. I've been doing tech writing for like over 20 years, but what you guys are talking about, I'm just starting. So this is exciting for me.
Nice. We all learn from each other, sharing our stories and experiences. I see on the room is John. I met John in the previous conversation we had before Christmas. I really appreciate you, John. You join us today. He's a very skillful person. He knows tons of things, but at the moment he's on the train. He already thrown in the chat valuable information. Thanks for joining.
I can try. Yeah, I'm in the. I've had to get off. I've had to get off the train. I'm in the far southwest of England, and it's been battered by a storm. So I've come into laptop under my arm into a pub on the side of the railway, conveniently located. I was actually really interested to hear everybody's take on things. Alex, as a coming from your perspective, something that's really interesting is I have a client called Prop Store, and it's film. They're like the Sotheby's or the Christie's of film and popular culture memorabilia. They recently sold Darth Vader's lightsaber for $3 million. And you know, and that's the sort of stuff that they do in these live auctions. And one of the things they have is they have a very strict they have a lot of copywriters, and they have a very strict way of writing copy. And they've decided to look at how can AI help this process along. And of course we have a lot of frightened copywriters who think that you know, they're basing what's going to happen on what they can do in ChatGPT and think that it's this is the end of their careers. But you just raised something really, really useful there, which was that they're going to move from being in technical writing or copywriting or whatever you may call it to becoming ontologists. So thanks for that. I'm going to use that, number one.
That's good.
Yeah, I've been trying to understand how to explain it to them, and that's gold. That is. The approach we're taking with them at the moment, and I know there's some crossover here, is that from a graph rag perspective, and we're building it as graph rag, but it's going to have recursion loops and all these sorts of things built into it. But what we arrived at is the very first thing to get knowledge out of the graph before we even build the graph. It's like number one, having an ontologist or a writer without a domain expert will fail immediately. You need that domain expert to help you first create your common vocabulary, and the common vocabulary is that we kind of, I've got a list here, but we kind of have it as this thing where you can't store what you can't name. So, you know, yeah. So you need that common vocabulary for the particular domain that you're working in. With this, it's a case of we're looking at films. And then we then look at the genre of the film. So, for example, it could be horror, and then we niche that down a bit further into the type of horror. So, a subset of horror. Then a director, like it could be Guillermo del Toro, and his type of horror and that sort of thing. But there's a common vocabulary that exists there. Then overlaid with that is you got to think of search at that point. So search needs hierarchy, right? So that's where your taxonomy comes in. So you're going to look at how to structure from your common vocabulary. How do you structure a taxonomy that provides you with a hierarchy internal to that? And then it's at that point where we get to what we call relationships and knowledge. We have the ontology and then the schema. So our sort of rule of thumb is that the schema stores facts and the ontology stores the understanding. So, and I think you guys know that. But that's kind of the process we take to be able to get understanding from the graph that we're building. I think one other thing that we've started to do is to look more closely at more closely at the ontology itself and look at the relationship that you're trying to express. And I'll use an example, not from PropStore, but from law, from another tool that we're building for family law and divorce. And it would be fairly easy to build an ontology based on the idea that you have some assets. So you have you'll have a party, the husband, the wife, they have an asset, which is a property. That asset has two truths, the value that each party gives to it. And what we found specifically with law and solving this two truths problem is to build an ontology based on claims rather than specifically on the relationships that exist between the assets. So, this person owns this house worth that has this valuation. So we're doing this. I guess there's probably a more specific name for it, but we're doing, or we're trying to frame it as either a claim-based ontology, or in another project, it's an experience-based ontology. So yeah, so I hope some of that makes sense in terms of your original questioning there, Dimitri.
Absolutely.
And then only one other thing was with respect to knowledge graphs in the device, which was asked earlier. So I actually have a use case on this, which I'll try and provide at some point, but which is specifically related to fraud and tracing. Well, yeah, it's a fraud use case, but it's what we're doing at the moment is we're building edge-based LLMs and tiny recursive models that operate at a device level and make calls to a knowledge graph or to the nodes and things in the background from a knowledge graph. But I think I dropped some stuff in there. Sorry, I'm trying to work from. I'm trying to do the meeting and serve everything from inside a mobile phone. But the models we're looking at for this is the Llama 3.2 framework, being Llama C++ libraries. But in graph-wise, you've got SQLite or embedded Neo4j, and then you can wrap all that up in React Native, Swift, Kotlin, etc.
So while you remain in that project on an SQL database, right? You
Yeah.
use the Llama to perform the queries into the database and give back the similar results. Is that the point?
Well, yeah. So that's one. The other, the better option that we're undertaking at the moment is we're using or testing with Surreal DB. And the beauty of Surreal DB is that one, it's multimodal unified data. So rather than having to move the data around for vectors and graph and stuff, etc., with Surreal DB, it brings the logic to the data. And so then, and it uses Surreal's query language, which is, I mean, if you put it next to SQL, you'd struggle to find the difference. But yeah, from a what you described is right, but what we are testing is from the edge is using because sorry, for one of the reasons is because Surreal DB also handles all the embeddings as well. So
it's a combination of graph database and the SQL database, and you have the vectorized data into the Surreal, which is the graph database you're using, right?
yeah.
And it recognizes the relationships and brings back from there what is the record from the SQL, right?
Yes.
Smart. Like it. So this is quite close to what Mark described previously, which is they use the SQL database Zano database for the system, but they have a Falcon
I know.
graph database to perform the queries for deeper understanding the case and bring back the results. And to be honest, I find this co-work of the two different databases it works the best because you can also store in one place the records as logs, which is the simplest approach. Also, you have the power of a graph database that also includes the vectorized data, which is very useful for the machine to find the right answer. Pablo, thanks for joining us today. Can we have you into the conversation? And
Yeah,
may I ask you, from your experience and your understanding, building a knowledge base, what is the thing that can make it to return us reasonable results, valuable results, from your perspective?
yeah. First of all, kudos for the panel today. It's really interesting. Uh, for me, I find it really fascinating people from all over the world discussing about knowledge graphs and how you can get the proper answers by querying a knowledge graph. Just to clarify, I'm always been the intersect between the business and the technical. So my knowledge was, I would say, balancing between the both because you need to adapt how to manage things. My background is mainly from the business side of things, but from the music industry. But now I'm in the consulting space. Mainly into innovation and digital transformation. But I'm also really intrigued by the fact that we need to consume information every day. And I was always intrigued about how to learn about the three L's, lifelong learner. And there are many methods of how you can extract information, many methodologies of how you can retrieve, which is at the very end of the user perspective. From my experience, when we built a music recommendation engine for a music streaming service, it was really difficult to handle the information. It was about 2.5 petabyte of music storage. We had what we call in terms of the ontology, we had to categorize the music by its genre and by its local genre. It was about 1,000 subgenres that we had to handle at that point. I don't think that one model fits all, if you ask me. First of all, the very best, which is crap in, crap out, the very best of the computer science. So if you have crap data, you are going to expose crap data to the user. In terms of speed for us, because at that point, at 2016, 17, when we were trying to build a really quick search engine and then start laying, the foundation behind our infrastructure in order to provide the best results. We find ways like KD trees where we we categorize our content based on specific local needs, and then we try to refine that search based on the weighting which was coming from the users. For instance, if you were to search Michael and then it was either Michael Jordan by mistake or Michael Jackson, then the weight for Michael Jackson for the music streaming would be much higher than the Michael Jordan. But the same search query into Netflix, it's a totally different thing because both have equal weight based on other factors such as trending or whatever the team was actually using. So I could speak for hours, but from my end, if you ask me, it depends on the usability of the end user and what you want to achieve at the end. For me today here, I came also to learn and meet you guys, is more about how we extract the information from what we are in the beginning start to learn and start to extract as information, because I want to build a knowledge base, a knowledge garden specifically for people who are learning up to high school, given the ADHD, given the way that they are consuming really fast information and all that. So for instance, if you have a big, let's say 1,000 book of a history book, and you want to learn only the basic stuff, you don't need to read the whole stuff. But how you can learn the system to extract the proper dates, information, as you were reading using the 5 whys methodology.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really important, if you ask me, and that's the difficulty of making this happen.
Well, from my perspective, I think Pablo, you have the absolute point here. And from my point of view, guys, this is what makes the job brilliant and less brilliant. The way we feed the data into the model and the model returns us back the right information we want to keep in our brain, in the knowledge garden, knowledge base. Truth be told, there are tons of papers describing different approaches for how to do that. Right? When I get started my journey into this knowledge-based world, I found the most common thing, that which is, okay, take the text, split it into chunks, and feed it to a model and get the output. If you want to validate an idea, I think firstly you have to try it. So what I'm saying now is based on my actual experience trying these approaches. And I found this thing couldn't give me reasonable results, because the connection of one paragraph with the previous one and the next one got lost when I was creating the chunks. And that's the challenge. So I started working with a different approach, saying, okay, what is my goal? What do I want to achieve? I want to build a knowledge base that can answer my questions. That's all. I want to build something for a chatting experience. And after that, I can go further. And truth be told is, if a knowledge base can answer questions with confidence, it means that it has at least the knowledge to give the responses because of the confidence, right? So what I did for my case is, I said, okay, this is the transcript. This is a list of questions I have, and I want from this transcript to answer these questions. And answering these questions, I get the knowledge graph back. And from there, I get started and get into deeper and deeper analysis using these questions. I found some papers describing this approach with the questions, which is pretty cool. The thing is, you have to validate the result you receive back from the first round and try to enrich your data. The way I'm doing that is, and this is how it works on the case study I'm working on. And let me share my screen to explain it. Maybe it's worth to be mentioned. Here is the page where user can just upload his transcript and it creates the knowledge graph here. The main focus is not on the UI part, but how it can act. We see here the entire brain created from 2 analyses and 2 transcripts. The process behind the scenes receives a prompt given from the admin how to analyze every transcript, driving in that way the analysis based on the purpose of the project. That's the thing. Everybody here, and I guarantee you, in previous conversation we had in these every second week sessions, the value of the purpose into the knowledge base drives the analysis. So I feed the transcript into Claude with the given prompt asking to give me back the nodes and edges, those dots and the connections. And then I feed them back to Claude saying, look, this was the initial answer, validate what exists into the transcript from this output, and verify that you enrich your data with extra context to have more content in there. And then after that, started the process for processing into the graph database. Behind the scenes, I'm using the Neo4j, but it doesn't really matter. So this is the entire approach. And then the user can get into the chat. I have some test chats, and by the way, that was a test input to see the results. From the chat, I asked to run the calculations, the cloud confidence, how confident is the model giving me back these responses, and the semantic match, which is what described Mark. The semantic match is an idea given to me by Mark, who was talking previously, where the model, the AI, receives the user question, it vectorizes this question, using this vector, tries to find the similar nodes and edges, and finding them, it comes back and getting them, feeds them to Claude to give me back in text the answer. That's the logic of this. And we see here, for example, which are the nodes used to bring back the response, and the semantic match is a measurable KPI where I can say, okay, it's above 50%. So it found a couple of matches. Now, if I'm not using exactly the same term for the query, this may drop, but the more context we give into each node as a description, the more helpful we make it for the model to find the right node from the database and can bring it back to us. So, closing up all of this thing about what can make the knowledge base to give us a reasonable result is firstly the main purpose, what we want to achieve building it, what is our goal, what is the reason to use it, as you said. Secondly, what kind of information do we have in our hands and the way we're going to process them. It's different to have transcripts, different to have emails, music data, totally different. And then it's a trial and error. We build fast, we test the results, and then we move forward. And we specialize on each step what is important for us. Because in a project that Pablo is running at the moment, a couple of information into the history example you gave, Pablo, a couple of information about what happened from who, you may don't really care. However, I want to take care of them. And the history example is very useful, I would say, as an example, because in the school, they're teaching us the history as a chronological series of facts, saying...
And memorization, which is crazy.
Yes, that's true. But they don't say the gossips behind the skins, right?
Yeah, exactly. The relationships, why that happened.
Yeah,
the merchant and the war and the logic and how to be a CEO, the CEO and how to manage people, time. All these relationships don't make sense when you don't have the context behind it. And yeah.
Absolutely true. Very recently, I was watching a podcast from Rory Sutherland, who is a marketeer, very well known. And he said, you know, guys, everybody's doing advertising today, but just a few around the world are pretty good. And their skill is to understand what drives the data. They can understand what is important to them. And for every single business is something different that is important. We don't follow a copy-paste approach. So what I would say is that, guys, Firstly, we have to try and error, find a way to try and destroy very easily and very fast, avoiding the technical part. That's my approach. Build in an hour, test it during the hour, kill it at the end of the hour if it doesn't work. If it works, move forward. It's quite easy anymore. The tools are on our hand, right? And from this, build your learning journey. That's how my learning journey is developed. Learning by doing.
Thank you. So I think you raise a really good point with that, with the 1 hour thing you just described there. But I use that. And I'm gonna I pushed out a blog on it this morning, and that is when you're working with clients as well. And I mean, my least favorite acronym is MVP. I hate it. It's the most misunderstood acronym on the planet. But the thing is your MVP is your MVP is very much that hour you're talking about. It's like, I need to be able to prove the architectural claim. And if I can prove an architectural claim, which I can do with a knowledge graph, if I can prove that architectural claim, then I'm MVP ready. And when I say MVP ready, what I mean is I'm now ready to build something around this that can be given to a consumer. But the idea that you're going to, I don't know, jump into Base or Lovable or whatever it is and spin up a bunch of buttons and have an MVP is, we all know, is ridiculous. But yeah, I'm having and I like the way you position it there as an hour, and for some projects it might be a bit more, with a client or whatever. But the idea, I have this method or approach that I'm pushing now, and I'm having a lot of luck with it, which is your MVP is your architectural claim. And get that right and move forward. And the graph, yeah, everything we're talking about here and the work that we're doing fundamentally is between the graph and the LLMs. It's that's how you make your architectural claim.
Totally true. I agree with that. And the MVP, because I saw your post today on LinkedIn, Jonathan. It's exactly that thing. MVP is not about the interfaces, it's not about how the user will sign up, it's how the user can get the maximum value with the minimum effort. And in the case of building knowledge bases, the thing is, how can I build something valuable for my business that can help me go one step further and solve one problem? That's all. Doesn't matter how. Doesn't matter.
And what I have, I think from a business perspective, commercial perspective in my own business, we're talking night and day in terms of the traction that I now have with clients from using knowledge graphs and graph rag basically, but using the two together to prove an architectural claim, using that approach to secure clients is from previous approaches, it's night and day. If you look I look at my legal tech clients at the moment, just in that one particular domain. I mean, I don't have the capacity for the amount of work that's coming in purely on this approach.
What do you mean with the capacity? Sorry, I didn't get it.
What I mean is the number, the number of legal firms that that I'm being approached by, specifically legal firms who want to look at a particular area in the legal sector, and who want to productize that. The number of lawyers that are coming forward purely as a result of, and yes, I've networked and I've presented at various sort of events and things, but the idea that the MVP is produce an architectural claim, not a feature, has been, and using the knowledge graph to do that. And in most cases, it's been Neo4j because it's just a very, it's a very quick, fast, and useful interface to do it. I think, yeah, my point is switching that, the narrative on the MVP to be about an architectural claim has been night and day.
Great, makes sense. Very insightful conversation. I would like to thank you guys. Pablo, it was a pleasure meeting you for first time. Johan, it's always a pleasure meeting you. Always, you bring so much effort in this conversation. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, thank you to you, Dimitri. Like Dimitris. Yeah, I think I pronounced that right. I know. You know, thanks for putting this together. It's and all the stuff you put online as well. You know, it's you're I think you'll do big things. You keep doing what you're doing. I think you're going to do big things with your what you're doing here.
Appreciate it, man.